How are we doing, ladies and gentlemen? It is Wednesday. Our team is 4-0. We've got the Knicks coming to town tomorrow in the return of Derrick Rose at the United Center. But more importantly, it is Hot Takes Wednesday, where I feature your Bulls hot takes and my reaction to them. So if you're new to the channel, feel free to leave your hot takes in the comments below, and I just might include it in next week's video. Also, most of you mentioned you would like to actually see a Bulls Would You Rather series start after the Would You Rather question I received in either bringing back Denzel Valentine to the Bulls for 15 minutes a game or bringing back Jim Boylen, probably the toughest Would You Rather question I have ever come across, but ultimately I went with Denzel Valentine. So I'll be starting that series likely sometime next week. So in addition to your hot takes, feel free to leave your Bulls Would You Rather scenarios in the comments as well. Let's make it fun. But in any event, let's get into the hot takes for this week, shall we? So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Our first hot take comes to us from Matthias Ringdahl. Caruso should win Sixth Man of the Year at least 4 games into the season because he is one of the most impactful players on the Bulls right now, but he won't because he does not score like Jordan Clarkson and Lou Will. I mean, you're probably right. It's one of the biggest issues I have with the Sixth Man of the Year award because people value scoring over all of the other intangibles someone provides off of the bench. Yeah, Caruso is an incredibly impactful player, not just in a short time with the Bulls, but you saw that when he was on the Lakers as well. But he's not a scorer and likely never will be. It's just never been something that has been needed from him for a team that he's been on. And as a result, he's not going to get the type of recognition for being a Sixth Man of the Year candidate. You know, I felt the same way about Thaddeus Young last season coming off the bench and the level of impact that he provided for the Bulls with his versatility and leadership, that he should have at least gotten more consideration for that award. Thaddeus did get a handful of votes, if I remember correctly, but didn't even finish top 5 for Sixth Man of the Year award, which of course went to Jordan Clarkson, who put up big scoring numbers for a reserve player. So I do think Caruso will likely get some votes for Sixth Man of the Year, but like Thaddeus, will probably not even crack the top 5. Next, we've got Cone. Bulls will start off 7-0 and lose to the 76ers due to Embiid bullying Vooch. So as much as I would love to see the Bulls start off 7-0, and I don't doubt that they can, but I don't think it's going to happen. They'll need to beat the Knicks, Jazz, and the Celtics in Boston to get to that point. And I see that being unlikely just because it was clear after the last game that this team still has some stuff they need to figure out. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. There was a near collapse at the end of the Raptors game against a team without their best player. The Bulls still haven't fully figured out their offense, and they've got to do a better job at taking care of the basketball and limiting turnovers, especially in the fourth quarter. And so I think because they are still figuring things out, which isn't a problem, it's expected that a new group of guys playing together at the start of the season, that there's going to be a learning curve before they show their full potential. But because of that, I don't see them winning all 3 of those games before facing the Sixers. And yeah, I mean, as for your statement on Embiid bullying Vooch, who doesn't, right? Embiid is a beast and bullies everybody in the paint. Next, we've got Edward Herring, Troy Brown Jr., and the trade exception to the Kings for Marvin Bagley. With the emergence of Javonte Green and Dosunmu, plus having Derrick Jones Jr., the Bulls have solid depth on the wing. Now, we've talked about a trade for Bagley before, and I'll say it again. I do think he would be a really good piece for the Bulls to give us some more depth in the front court. He's a power forward, but can also play the 5. He's athletic, can score, and get rebounds. Again, people forget he was a former number 2 pick, and with all of the chaos and dysfunction that is the Sacramento Kings, it's pretty clear his time there is numbered when he's barely seeing minutes on the floor. Now, as for the trade that you're suggesting, though, of Troy Brown Jr. and the trade exception, I mean, I like it. I like it for the Bulls, obviously, because you're right, we're already deep at the wing and would need more big men, but I don't think it's enough for the Kings to give up on Bagley. I mean, it is the Kings and they're horrible when it comes to making transactions in the NBA, so maybe they would go for it, but you're likely going to have to include more than just Troy Brown Jr. and the trade exception, likely a second-round pick at a minimum. Next up, we've got Marcus Lavine. Vucevic is actually our most important player this season. The way the team is built, if he goes down with an injury, we are screwed. So when I first started reading this, initially I was thinking, you're out of your mind to think that Vucevic is our most important player, but most important doesn't necessarily mean the best player or even the most impactful player, but rather, how would this team do if we were to lose them? Obviously, losing a player like Lavine would be devastating for the Bulls, but they would still have DeRozan, Lonzo, Coby White, even Ayo to make up for his scoring. Vice versa, if the Bulls were to lose DeRozan, they would still have Lavine. Losing Lonzo Ball, you would still have Coby White or Ayo or Caruso. Like, you would have options in all of these scenarios. They're not ideal, and the Bulls wouldn't be as good without any of these guys, but you would have options. But losing Vucevic, what's our alternative? We start Tony Bradley, and really, he becomes our only big man on the roster at that point since Simonovic is down in the G League, although I'm sure if this were to happen, he likely would be called up. Like, where do the Bulls get their rebounds? They're scoring in the paint without Vucevic. I talked about this in my last video, but the Bulls were out-rebounded by 20 boards against the Raptors, and our power forward, Patrick Williams, had 0 rebounds. The Bulls' protection of the glass would be pretty bad if they lost Vucevic, and the fact that you even brought this up is actually important in that it shows just how limited we are in the front court, and that, going back to the previous hot take and having someone like Marvin Bagley or another athletic backup center or power forward would be very, very valuable for the Bulls. Next up, we've got Francisco with 2 hot takes, actually. The first is Patrick Williams should come off the bench, allowing Caruso to start. And the second, DeRozan will end up coming off the bench by the middle of the season, allowing him to be the main scorer against bench players and not have to deal with hard defensive assignments. He will become 6th man of the year. Well, I'm actually going to start with your second hot take because it's an easy one. No, DeRozan will never be coming off the bench this season. You don't pay a guy to over $25 million a year to have him come off the bench. I get what you're saying in that it gives the second unit scoring and DeRozan would light up an opposing team's second unit, but that's why you have rotations where DeRozan would get some time with the second unit, and the same with Lavine for that matter. So no, DeRozan won't be coming off the bench by midseason. As for your first take, if you guys had a chance to catch my video from yesterday, you kind of know my stance is temporarily. I think it makes sense to have Patrick Williams come off the bench while he gets his conditioning up, just because he just doesn't seem to be himself. But I don't think starting Caruso would be the answer. I actually like having Caruso come off the bench and leading the second unit, as he's done it very well thus far. And I would prefer starting either Javonte Green or Alize Johnson in that role, both guys who have stepped up and played nicely at the 4 spot. Next up, we've got Nico Stark. By the All-Star break, Ayo will take most of Troy Brown Jr.'s minutes. Well, I know Ayo technically can play the wing, but I don't really see him taking minutes away from Troy Brown Jr., especially considering Troy Brown actually had himself a very nice game against the Raptors the other night. If anything, I could see Ayo taking minutes away from Coby White, depending on how Coby returns from his injury. It's always a bit nerve-wracking when a shooter injures their shoulder. I know it's his non-shooting hand shoulder, but still it always makes you think someone like Markelle Fultz, who literally forgot how to shoot the basketball because of a shoulder injury. So I would be less surprised to see Ayo take some minutes away from someone like Coby White than someone like Troy Brown Jr., just because they don't play the same positions. Next, we've got the big one. Bulls go get Ben Simmons in a mid-season trade. Never wrong, my G. Well, most of you guys know I was all about the Bulls going after Ben Simmons before all the free agency moves happened. The problem was I wasn't willing to trade much for him. Trading Lavine for Simmons made 0 sense. I wasn't willing to include Vucevic in the trade package, and I wasn't willing to include Patrick Williams. So the trade likely would have never happened anyway because we just didn't have the trade chips to get it done. And I said, if the Bulls do in fact bring in Lonzo Ball via free agency, which was the general consensus that they would, that at that point trading for Simmons doesn't make sense. And now that the Bulls have Lonzo Ball, a defensive playmaker, and he actually shoots well, unlike Ben Simmons, then trading for Simmons is out. It just doesn't make sense for the Bulls at that point. Not only that, but they don't have the cap space to take on his massive contract anymore anyway. So no, can't say I see this happening. He wouldn't fit on the roster, and the Bulls don't even have the trade chips to make a trade for him, even if they wanted him. Next, we've got Ivan Rosales. I'm sure AK will not trade Coby White. I'm sure they will send Tony Bradley and Troy Brown Jr. for a solid power forward or better center. So I can totally see something like this. It kind of ties back to the other trades that we were talking about, and that the Bulls already have enough depth off the wing, and Troy Brown Jr., because he's young, has decent trade value, and yes, the Bulls need that depth with a better power forward or center or someone like Tony Bradley. So I wouldn't be shocked if something like this happened before the trade deadline, depending on how the team is trending at the time. Let's do one more, and this one comes to us from EJ Martino. Wendell Carter Jr. is going to outplay Vucevic this season. Ooh, I like this one. Well, I've said before, I do think Vucevic is going to have a down year, and by down year, I mean he's still going to play very well and at a high level, but his numbers are going to go down a bit by virtue of being a third option on this Bulls team, whereas the numbers we used to see from Vucevic were him as a number 1 option on the Magic. With guys like Lavine, DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, he's not going to be putting up 24 points per game like we saw last season. All that being said, though, Can't say I see Wendell having a better season than Vucevic. I mean, yeah, Wendell is probably going to have one of the best seasons of his career because he's playing on a bad team. He's getting closer to his prime, so in theory, he should be getting better. But Wendell just doesn't stack up against someone like Vucevic. Just some quick number comparisons, and granted, it's only 4 games, but even with Vucevic getting off to a pretty slow start for him, he's still averaging more points per game, more rebounds, more assists, and more steals than Wendell, while Wendell leads Vucevic only in blocks by just 2.2 actually blocks per game. And again, Wendell was always more known for his defense than someone like Vucevic. Even his defense hasn't looked that much better than Nikola Vucevic. So, obviously time will tell as the season progresses. I actually do think Wendell will have himself a nice season, but he's not going to outplay Vucevic in my opinion. I'll end it there for this week though, guys. Don't forget the Bulls will be taking on the Knicks tomorrow night. I'll have a live chat for that game. Don't forget to put your hot takes into the comments and your would you rather scenarios as well. As always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.